Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
From her rich and fertile valleys to the shores of her icy seas, from her fields and farms and shellfish beds and her many nurseries, for the finest of the flavor, for the freshest by far, choose the things Alaskans bring to the market where you are. Products that we're proud to call our own, and it's all Alaska grown.
The National Weather Service.
Hobo Jim gets me right in the feels every time. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this beautiful day in July, and it is a warm one. Many across the interior and south central will experience more warmth again tomorrow. You can always check your latest forecast information as well as your current weather conditions by going to weather.gov/Alaska. And you probably noticed the web pages have changed a little bit. It may take you a little more time to find what you need, but you know what? If it takes you too long, send us an email. Find us on Facebook or Twitter and say, hey, where is my current conditions? Where's my radar? Where's my marine weather forecast? Because I'm going out and going to fish this weekend, and I really want to know, and I really want to get some fish. So we can't tell you where the fish are, but we can certainly point you toward where that forecast information is so you have a good and safe time. The weather info line has not changed. 800-472-0391 is the place to go. And our social media stuff hasn't changed as well. NWS Alaska is on Facebook, NWS Alaska on Twitter, and of course you can find NWS Fairbanks, NWS Juneau, and NWS Anchorage anytime you want. Use the hashtag AKwx and find us on YouTube in the afternoon for your daily afternoon map briefings and a whole lot more, including this entire show, which you'll be able to find from your TV weather section on your new website. We've embedded this show in our module there, so you can just click over to the TV section and then click on Alaska Weather TV show, and you should be able to see all 30 minutes of me and everybody else, of course. We certainly thank the TV weather team. Here's a look at the fire danger across the region, and for many, especially across south central and southwest, last week things really changed and kind of eased up a little bit. But we still have some dry spots along the Yukon Valley, across the upper Yukon Valley, across the Seward Peninsula, and across the Copper River Basin. And we're talking about the lower terrain here for sure. That's where the problem seems to be for at least elevated or high fire danger. Extreme fire danger, not on the chart right now. So conditions have not reached that level. And of course, you're thinking about last year and how bad things were. Pretty big difference, isn't it? Yeah, it's a good thing, I think. So we shall see. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and not hard to find a couple areas of low pressure thanks to the swirls and, of course, thanks to the dry air that's being wrapped into those. And you can see them marking up some of the area there in the eastern Gulf with that circulation, also around Kodiak Island, another wave working through. And there's another wave of low pressure trying to work its way northward, but high pressure is really in command of the western and central Bering. You can see the low, smooth clouds here. Fog and stratus across the northern Bering Sea and into the Bering Strait. And as we look northward, you can see quite a wealth of dry air. And under all of this, of course, is that midnight sun, just slow baking southwest in the central and eastern interior, the Seward Peninsula, all the way through the Brooks Range. We did have some convection today. That is rising air currents billowing the clouds, creating showers and thunderstorms. Generally widely scattered storms here across the eastern Brooks Range, and a lot of activity working out of the Yukon and working their way westward into eastern and southern Alaska there. And more of that is going to be possible probably as we head into later this week. But tomorrow it looks like the greatest risk, if any, will be probably closer to the southwestern coast and maybe a few pop-up cells across the Kenai Peninsula. It seems to change on a little bit of a daily basis about how much instability is possible across the region. But one thing we do know is there is an easterly push coming out of the Yukon, which is pretty normal for this time of the year. As that happens, though, that does increase the chance for convection or those rising air currents to move over south central and southwest and the interior. As we look further northward, a lot of what you're seeing here across the North Slope today is low clouds and stratus. In fact, for a time, Barrow was looking at fog and IFR conditions there at the airport. Things did not look very nice there, at least earlier in the morning. As you look out across the west, that north and westerly push coming off the Kamchatka Peninsula is also feeding into high pressure. And things are going to change up a little bit here as we get into the next couple days for the North Slope. With a colder air push coming in from the north and west, we are watching the ice situation around Barrow. There is high concentrations of ice there around Barrow, but there's also some openings within that. And as that northwesterly wind comes in, we think it's going to be possible that as we get into Friday and Saturday, some of those polynyas could close off. And not only that, that some of that high concentrations of ice could be pushed ashore, anywhere from Wainwright to about Barrow. So we have high confidence that things are going to change for the areas of open water, and we have about moderate confidence that some of that ice is going to move up onto the Chukchi Seacoast. So if you're in those areas, you need to be paying attention to the weather and the changes that are coming with that northwesterly wind, especially as it relates to ice. Now, as we look at southeast, low pressure is in the much warmer sector of this whole weather pattern. You see low just off the coast of Haida Gwaii. Frontal boundaries working northward. This is falling apart already, but earlier today, thunderstorms were trying to make their way over the hills and into places like Haines and Skagway, and it looked like showers were fairly close. Looked like most of the lightning stayed on the other side of the hill, of course, but not impossible for that to happen. So folks in Juneau were alerting you there on Twitter and on social media there. So hopefully you received that message. If you didn't, make sure you check in that way with Juneau, because NWS Juneau is a great tool to have on your phone. If you're just not in front of the computer, you can get alerts and set them up to alert you automatically that way and receive text messages to give you more information. High pressure across Nome sitting at 1,022 millibars, and a lot of dry air over a lot of central and southwest Alaska because of that. High pressure also sitting south of Kiska at 1,034 millibars. As we get into tonight, you'll see this weak push coming into the central Gulf, bringing showers with it. It's really not very strong. It's not very wet. It's not very well organized. And it is going to run into a ridge of high pressure here across the north and eastern Gulf. That wave that we were watching across southeast, that pretty much falls apart. High pressure sitting across south central. That'll encourage some areas of scattered clouds and a chance for a few storms across the Talkeetna and the Alaska Range, and also across the eastern Brooks Range. With high pressure and command of the Bering Sea, things are fairly quiet there, a drizzle or a drip, and that's about it. And we'll watch the next wave move out of the Chukchi Sea. Northwesterly is coming in behind this cold front, and that will slowly approach the Chukchi coast Wednesday. Not going to be there just yet. High pressure still in command of the Beaufort Seacoast at 1,022 millibars. By tomorrow afternoon, a possibility for a few showers and storms across the higher terrain. And across southeast, a few showers for the central and southern parts of the Panhandle. And there's our system out here across the western Gulf at 1,007 millibars. Again, not terribly stout systems to speak of there. That banks to the west as we get into Thursday. Areas of fog, drizzle, and drips again for most of the Alaska Peninsula and part of the eastern Aleutians. A few areas of light rain from Kodiak Island to maybe around Resurrection Bay and Seward southward. A few showers closing in on Yakutat, and the best chance for showers and thunderstorms will once again be around the higher terrain of the Alaska Range and Talkeetna and maybe into southwestern Alaska. Now, as we get into Thursday, the front is still creeping eastward, and remember, Friday and Saturday are the days we're watching between Wainwright and Barrow for that ice that is offshore to maybe make an approach toward shore. So if you're in those regions again, be mindful of that. High pressure still in command of the Bering on Thursday at 1,027 millibars. Today, a good day for baked Alaska. 60s and 70s for most of southeast. Slow roaster kind of day. 65 around Juneau, 70 from Sitka, Ketchikan, and Annette, both in the mid-60s. At least 70s there around Hyder by late day. Prince William Sound saw temperatures from about the mid to upper 60s, even low 70s around Valdez and Cordova. 72 in Anchorage. It was 84 in some of the passes. 79 around Fairbanks today, same for Fort Yukon, and this again was around 3 o'clock, so it's probably gotten a little bit warmer since. Remember I said there was fog up around Barrow? 37 degrees there, just a few miles inland toward Atkasuk. It was 61 out of the fog and definitely in the sun. Big difference that makes. 54 degrees around Kaktovik, 54 around Kivalina, 63 for Kotzebue, 51 around Nome today, upper 40s to mid-50s around the Bering Strait, down to 55 in Gamble, 70s for Bethel. It's going to be hotter there tomorrow. Tanana, also a slow roaster kind of day at 81. Could be hotter for you tomorrow as well. McGrath expected to be warmer at 76. As you get into Lake Iliamna and southwest, temperatures were in the mid to upper 70s, 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak, 60 degrees, low 50s for St. Paul and St. George. And a good chunk of southwestern parts of Alaska were also fairly mild. Now, here's a look at temperatures tonight. You're expected to see many areas back in the lower to mid 50s for southeast, south central mid 50s as well. Kodiak 54. Overnight low temps back in the mid to upper 50s, maybe 60 degrees around the middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks. Lower 40s for the Arctic coast. Just shy of 50 for Nome, southwest, mid 50s for you, and upper 40s to low 50s for most of the chain as well as the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures tomorrow are going to be awfully warm again, especially along the Yukon Valley and the Kuskokwim Valley from McGrath to Fairbanks to Tanana to Eagle and also Northway. Temperatures easily in the 80s. Fairbanks could hit the mid to upper 80s easily, and we could be pushing into some record territory for many locations there. Ambler and Bettles also very warm, 50s and 60s around the North Slope, 59 in Kaktovik. Nome looking at 61, 59 for Nunivak Island. Southwest again, upper 70s to near 80 degrees. Remember, if you're not used to this heat, make sure you're drinking plenty of water, taking breaks, and finding a shady spot. Don't work outside when you start getting a headache, or even if you stop sweating. That's a sign your body needs to get a little bit more of a break. That means more water and more break and more shade. So find a cool spot, fan yourself off, put a wet washcloth on your forehead, and take it easy for a little bit of time. And then maybe you can try again. But don't overdo it in this kind of heat if this is not what you're used to in southwest Alaska or the west coast. For southeast, I think you're going to be okay. Mid to upper 60s for the most part. Haines and Skagway could be a little warmer back in the 70s. 63 around Sitka. Mid 60s for Ketchikan and Annette. Hyder looking fairly mild tomorrow as well. Upper 60s and low 70s for most of south central. Talkeetna could get close to 80 degrees. You take it easy as well up there. 65 around Kodiak. And upper 50s and low 60s for most of the Alaska Peninsula, 55 in St. Paul. Here's a check on what's going on as we head into the right button. There we go. Flying weather. IFR conditions off the Chukchi coast as well as most of the Bering tomorrow. The central and western chain starting out at IFR. Southeast, south central, the interior, all clear there. Look at the VFR all the way around. We're watching for convection for the Alaska Peninsula and south central tomorrow afternoon. IFR stays off the coast in the northwest, probably sneaks into places like Sand Point and the central and western chain, but out of reach for St. Paul and St. George, expecting MVFR conditions there. Here's your pass conditions, though, as we just saw. VFR for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass. For Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, things looking A-OK there. Watching for convection around the Horn in the Alaska Range all the way through Windy Pass and Isabel Pass. As you look up toward Mentasta Pass, there's a chance for storms there tomorrow. Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR throughout the day. Watching for cloud buildup in the afternoon. And for Portage Pass, even over the Kenai Peninsula, watch out for some thunderstorms to be spotty in that area. Chilkoot and White Pass look pretty good. VFR conditions expected for you. Freezing levels, look at the warm air. In fact, north of Alaska, it gets even hotter. 12 to 14,000 foot freezing levels there. Out of the Gulf is where some of the coolest air is, with levels there around or even a little bit below 8,000 feet. Icing potential then obviously way above 10,000 feet, passing through central parts of southeast, maybe the southern quarter. Again, hit and miss, but you're going to have to go pretty high up there to find light to isolated moderate potential. Why is this happening? The jet stream is in a little bit of a strange orientation. We have high pressure sitting off the north slope, keeping the main Arctic jet well north of Alaska, and the Pacific jet is well south. So we're kind of caught in this doldrum of heat where that's over northern Alaska and the cool weather is across the Gulf of Alaska. So at 9,000 feet, we have very light winds coming in from west to east, about 5 to 10 knots. A southeasterly flow over southwestern Alaska and a very light area of low pressure just sitting offshore of southeast. Similar conditions at 3,000 feet. Light winds for the most part, 10 to 20 knots at best coming over southwestern Alaska and the North Slope. You see a little bit of a faster flow, though, across Barrow at 35 knots with high pressure in command of the North Pacific. So turbulence at best. There's a little chop across the Chukchi coast below 4,000 feet. That's probably a little bit of a stretch. At most, you'll need to worry about showers and thunderstorms developing over the higher terrain tomorrow. That's your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Paranto. The National Weather Service Alaska region has 3 forecast offices strategically located throughout the state that provide weather, hydrologic, and climate forecasts for Alaska and its surrounding waters. One of those offices is located in Fairbanks. Today in the studio I have John Lingus, who is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Fairbanks Forecast Office, and he's going to tell us about his office and what kind of products and services it provides. Welcome to the studio, John.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. Can you give us a quick overview about the Fairbanks Forecast Office?
Sure can. The National Weather Service office in Fairbanks is located on the University of Alaska campus. We're actually renters, and we take up part of a floor in the International Arctic Research Institute, or the AKwx building, on the west ridge of the campus. We are co-located then with the Atmospheric Sciences Department of UAF, which is a great partnership there.
Yeah, and you're 24 hours?
We have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week forecast operations.
Okay. And the general products and services that you provide, what are those?
Well, there's 4 basic types. There are our public forecast products for our 26 weather zones across our northern Alaska, and that covers the land area. Those public forecasts are written in general terms for the overall public. We have marine forecasts that cover 9 marine zones, coastal marine zones, that are in use by mariners across northern Alaska waters. And then we also write forecasts for 12 airport locations across northern Alaska. And those 3 types of forecasts are issued all the time, that is every day, 2 to 4 times a day. Then in the summer, actually beginning in as early as May and extending through August and once in a great while into September, we write fire weather forecasts for wildfire concerns, and especially for the land management agencies who are dealing with wildfire. And on top of all those programs, as needed, we write or we issue warnings and advisories for various weather hazards associated with any or all of these programs, these services, as needed and year-round.
What are some of the challenges that you have to endure for your area of responsibility?
Well, I guess one of the most obvious challenges, Jim, is that we have a large area to forecast for. You know, I overlaid this on a map of the lower 48, and it takes up about 10 Midwestern states, the area that we forecast for. We start at the crest of the Alaskan Range, we go all the way north of Barrow, we go from the Canadian border on the east side all the way to the Bering Strait. So it's a lot of real estate.
And a lot of weather happens within that real estate, right? So it's challenging for the forecasters.
You know, sometimes, weather patterns are quiet. We might only get one weather system affecting the area. Other times, when it's very active, we could get 3 or 4 different weather systems affecting our total area. We've got just a lot to look at, a lot to cover, and we have a lot more observations now than we did 20 years ago, but there's still vast areas without weather information. So.
What are some of the unique weather forecasts that you're putting out of your office?
Well, one of the forecasts we began back in the late 90s was a recreational forecast for Mount McKinley. And it's really geared to the upper elevations of the mountain, starting at about 7,000 feet. We have it broken into several layers there in general, and we write some specific forecasts for those layers for the first about 24 hours, like a first 12-hour period and the second 12-hour period. And then we write also a outlook for the next 3 days after that. And we do this at basically to serve not only the public on the mountain, but also we align it specifically with the National Park Service and their ranger program on the mountain that begins in early May and then ends in mid-July. So we try to align it with those types of needs. And one of the things we found out about this forecast is, although we can try to provide some detailed information, but mountain weather is highly variable, and it changes a lot. But what we found the most useful is the outlook section where their trends are forecast, and that's very critical to planning on the mountain.
Are you doing any experimental forecasts?
Funny you should ask, Jim. Actually, we started over last winter to develop a product called the offshore forecast for the Arctic waters. And our coastal waters forecasts go out 60 miles. So if you can imagine where that 60 miles ends north of the Arctic coast, then from that point on, about 100 miles north, we have the Arctic waters, offshore waters forecast. And we divided that area into 3 zones. And it is seasonal. We start at once one of those 3 zones becomes ice-free. It would appear to be normally the western zone. And that begins, like this year, for the first time, was in early July. And then as the other zones become at least like 50% ice-free, we then add those in. Now this year we only had forecasts for the western zone and the middle zone. The eastern zone never got sufficiently ice-free enough. And then just a couple weeks ago, actually probably within the last week of about mid-November, we ended the forecast because the zones had iced up sufficiently then.
Okay. The Storm Ready program, that's a National Weather Service program.
Mm-hmm.
You're involved with that. Can you just touch a little bit on the program and how you're using that in your office?
Well, right now we have 2 communities that are storm ready, Nome and McGrath. And we just look forward to working with other communities. We've touched base with some of them and given information out. And we know that there's several communities desirous of becoming storm ready. So
and what does it mean to be storm ready?
Well, you know, it really means, I term it as an opportunity to discover how you're prepared to handle weather hazards. That's basically in a nutshell. And so it's a lot about discovering what you already have in place, maybe finding a few things that you need to add. You put those in, and then you can become storm ready. It's a voluntary program. It's just a way to become prepared in a certain way for weather hazards.
Great, that's wonderful. John, thank you for coming into the studio today and imparting all this wonderful knowledge to us. We'll have to have you again soon. Don't be a stranger.
All right.
For you folks out there who would like to know more about the Fairbanks Forecast Office, they have a wonderful website. It's weather.gov/Fairbanks. If you type that in on your browser, you'll go to their forecast website, and you'll be able to see a lot of the information that we talked about here in the interview. Thank you again, John, for coming in.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Thanks, Jim and John. Here is a look at today's sea ice edge, and I'll caution you that our web address, of course, has changed, so I need to get in here and clean this up a little bit. However, something to think about is what's coming our way with the weather. A northwesterly push moving across the Chukchi Sea. Remember, I said that was going to be about Thursday night into Friday. A stronger northwesterly push could close off this polynya here between Barrow down to Wainwright. We think that's a pretty for sure thing. The question is how much of this ice is going to make it onshore here between Wainwright and Barrow, and we think that is a possibility too. So we'll keep giving you updates. You make sure that you head to weather.gov/Alaska and look for sea ice, and that will give you the update there that you need, with further updates expected tomorrow and again through the rest of the week. Now, as we look at southeast, look for light winds, generally a southerly flow on the inside, 10 to 15 knots, small seas around 3 feet, and a light onshore push north of Sitka around 10 knots, and a gentle south and easterly flow south of Sitka with seas between 4 and 5 feet on the outside. For Thursday, very little change. Still looking for light southerlies on the inside, about 10 to 15. Northwesterlies developing in the Clarence Strait at 15 knots. And northwesterlies coming down the outer coast between 5 and 15 knots, looking for 4 to 5 foot seas there on Thursday. A light and variable wind for most of the north and western Gulf Coast and inside of Prince William Sound. Look at those almost flat seas. Are you kidding? Looks like a great day tomorrow. Easterlies east of Kodiak Island, 25 knots with a 6 foot sea. Northeasterlies not quite as strong inside of Shelikof Strait. And south and southwesterly flow coming up Cook Inlet at about 10 to 15 knots for tomorrow. For Thursday, a gentle southwest flow still around 15 knots with a 4 foot sea out in the middle. A light and variable wind west of the Barrens, a south and easterly wind coming into Kodiak Island and the Barren Islands, 15 to 20, and easterlies crossing the Shelikof with a 7-foot sea. Still looking for small seas and light winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound and from Seward down toward Resurrection Bay and Gore Point. As we get into the Bristol Bay region, light southeast winds there. Great if you're going after fish. 2-foot seas there, northerlies down the coast at 20 knots. East and northeasterly winds coming from Castle Cape all the way down towards Sand Point and past. 25 to 30 knots with a 6 to 8-foot sea on the Pacific side. That'll come up to 8-foot seas in all areas for the Pacific on Thursday with a gentle southeast wind. Northeasterlies a little bit more as you get down toward King Cove. 8-foot seas again on all areas and 3 to 5-foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. 20-knot winds coming up there inside of Bristol Bay for Thursday. For the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, light winds out across the west. 10 knots, 4-foot seas from Kiska to Attu. North and westerlies coming into the central and eastern chain. The strongest winds out here from Unalaska to Nikolsky at 20 knots with a 4 to 5-foot sea. As we get into Thursday, the winds diminish there on the Bering Sea side. 5-knot winds expected there. Northerlies continue across the central chain at 15 knots. And light and variable winds for the western chain around 10 knots with a 3 to 4-foot sea on Thursday. For the west coast, southwesterlies around St. Lawrence Island, 10 knots. Northerlies elsewhere around Nunivak Island, 15 knots with a 3 to 4-foot sea. About the same there for the Pribilofs. For Thursday, the winds come up a little bit more to 20 knots around the Pribs. 5-knot winds expected. Easterlies blowing out of the Kuskokwim Delta and west and southwesterlies for the northern Bering Sea. Now, as we get into Wednesday, a south and westerly flow coming up the Chukchi coast, 15 to 25 knots with seas as high as 6 to 7 feet, light winds across the Beaufort Sea. For Thursday, winds become westerly there with a 15-knot wind, 2-foot seas north of Kaktovik and Deadhorse, and south and westerly. Still ahead of that front. We're watching for that front to come in as we get into Thursday night and Friday. That will bring the northwest winds, and we'll see those on tomorrow's charts when you tune into Alaska weather. Here's a look at tonight's forecast again. Showers and thunderstorms possible across the higher terrain. Fairly quiet conditions for southeast, a few showers for the Alaska Peninsula, and a warm night for many and a hotter day tomorrow for most of the interior and southwestern Alaska. We'll watch for a few showers and storms over the higher terrain. There's the front coming in from the north and west, and not quite there on Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.